So you've built 3 successful businesses, perhaps more than that, but publicly you've got the chiropractic practice, you've got your direct sales company, and now your coaching and speaking platform. You're building these. What was your plan to make those successful?
Well, what's interesting about success and planning is it kind of happens along the way. There's only a certain degree can we strategize. First of all, my plan was to get help and guidance. So I sought coaches out, I sought mentors out and things. If I ever wanted something, like if I wake up tomorrow and I want to exit without exiting, I'm going to call you because you've already done it. So that's a big one that I always talk about is, the first step is to not make the plan yourself, because if you knew it yourself, you'd already have it. So find somebody that already knows the plan because that you can see they have what you desire.
In today's ultra-competitive business world, being a successful entrepreneur or business owner can be very challenging. Fortunately, contemporary times have blessed us with resources for tackling those challenges and getting us to success more quickly than we could have imagined. Welcome to The Root of All Success with the real Jason Duncan, a podcast that explores how the world's most powerful entrepreneurs grow incredible companies. This podcast looks at the 5 keys to unlocking success as an entrepreneur. A successful educator turned entrepreneur, Jason's mission is to use his gifts of teaching and leadership to help others get the results they want out of life. Join Jason every week and learn the keys to grow a truly successful business.
Welcome back to the show. This is the real Jason Duncan. What an honor. What an honor that you're here today. Thank you for choosing to take a listen to this show, whether you're driving to work, walking the dog, walking on the treadmill, or just cleaning the house, whatever it is that you're doing. Thank you for taking the time to pop in the earbuds and listen. I got some new earbuds for Christmas not too long ago, and I listened to my podcast on my new Pixel Buds and enjoying that. So whatever you're listening on, thank you. If you're watching on YouTube, remember you can watch this at youtube.com/TheRealJasonDuncan, and you can watch me and my guest today. I've got my guest coming from the state of New York. And here I am recording from my home office in Tennessee, just north of Nashville. And so our guest, JC Doornick, is going to be joining us by Zoom here in just a minute. But let me do a couple of preliminary things. First of all, I want to say thank you to the C-Suite Radio Network for keeping us syndicated on all podcast players and putting us out into an audience like you so that you can find us. We are growing. Our listenership is growing. Unique listeners are growing. Our 5-star ratings are continuing to go up. Our subscriptions are going up. And that is because you give us awesome guests. You audience members reach out and say, hey, you should have this person on your show. Thank you for introducing me to some great people. And if you have somebody you want to introduce me to, go to therootofallsuccess.com. And there's a button at the top of that page that says apply to be on the show. Just recommend somebody to be on the show. Maybe it's you. Maybe you're that successful entrepreneur that we need to have on the show to talk about your journey to success. So thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate from the bottom of my heart. I love doing the show. So let me introduce Dr. JC Doornick, otherwise known as Dragon, to the show here in just a minute. I'm going to welcome him in just a second, but let me tell you a little bit about him. We met, and we'll talk a little bit more of this in the show, but we met at a conference where he and I were both guest speakers at a conference in Denver, Colorado back in September of 2021. And we hit it off, and he ended up inviting me on his podcast. I invited him, of course, onto my podcast, and he's got a great story. He started off in life becoming a chiropractor and built an amazing chiropractic practice. He became the co-founder of a worldwide humanitarian organization that serves the third world. He even won awards such as Humanitarian of the Year. And he built an amazing practice. But the problem was with his practice is that he was working over 100 hours a week. He was over 80 pounds overweight. He wasn't paying attention to his family, and he wasn't paying attention to the things that mattered most in his life. And he found himself at a crossroads. And in walks a person he'd never met before into his practice and introducing him to a new business idea that he would have said no to a million times, but this time he said yes to. And it completely changed his life yet again. And he goes on to build another very successful direct sales organization and ends up giving away his practice. Yeah, he did. He exited the wrong way. And he's going to talk about that on the show today, but he built an amazing business again that gave him the means and the ability to travel the world and do great things. And he's going to tell us a story about how he met his wife, Mieke, and how they're working on adopting a brand new daughter into their family right now. Dragon frequently takes the stage and speaks to live audiences, upwards of 11,000 people. And he travels the world when they can, of course, the pandemic notwithstanding, creating memories, seeking to give an adventurous experience to himself and to his family. And he's got a podcast called Rise Up with Dragon. You can even go look up riseupwithdragon.com and read all about his podcast and what he does. And I was a guest not too long ago on the show. So help me welcome to the show the one and only Dr. JC Dragon Doornick. JC, welcome to the show, man. Thanks for doing this.
It's good to be here, man.
Well, so let's start with this. You and I met at a conference in Denver where you were speaking and I was speaking. It was our friend Greg Kimball put the conference on, the TFP Summit in Denver back in September of 2021. And we hit it off, man. You're a pretty cool dude. Got to meet you, got to meet your lovely wife. And you have had a pretty amazing story, and we're going to talk all about your story today. But I want to start with this because I happen to know that just recently you've gone through a pretty amazing personal issue of adopting a daughter. So before we get into all the business stuff, I am really interested to know what happened, because when we were talking back in September, you were about to get on a plane and fly and to go spend some time with her. And so tell us a little bit about how that happened, because meeting your wife, that's a whole great story. So tell us that story, and then we'll get into the business.
And maybe the most relevant part of the story is that because I had to leave on that plane, I didn't get to see you speak. That's true. Which is a big part of our conversation. Great to be here, man. You know, I'm a big fan of you, everything you do and your show. And, you know, it's rare that you meet somebody that you actually enjoy following up with and stuff. I think what you're doing is great. So it's my privilege to be here. So, you know, it's a little bit of a long story, but, you know, you mentioned this adoption. Just real quick version of it is I was previously married and was single for about 7 years. And, you know, that's an interesting story as it was. But let's just say I was really bad at dating. I'm very, very good at business and a lot of stuff we'll talk about, but bad at dating. But what's relevant about it is that during those 7 years, I was having a repeated vivid dream while I was failing at dating. I was having a dream all the time that I had a daughter, and it was about specifically this one specific girl at all phases of her life, you know, an adolescent baby, walking her down the aisle, the whole thing. Now I have 2 boys, big boys, but I don't have a daughter. But in my dreams, once or twice a week, and it was a pleasant dream, I was having a dream. Now you don't tell people you're dreaming about a daughter, a little girl. So
no, you don't do that.
As you can imagine, this was my little secret, but it was a pleasant dream, which is another thing you don't tell people about, right? So, but you get the picture. So when I met who I call Chicken, my wife, Mieke, we met on an online app. And the reason why I did that is because I didn't want to date people that knew me after I got off a big stage, right? So we hit it off immediately, her and I, and things moved really, really fast. She was the one. But what's relevant in the story is there was a day where she said, "Hey, listen, we're moving very fast, and I want to make sure you know some things about me." Now that's an interesting thing to hear from a woman, you know, but, and I know you'll resonate with this, but when you truly love someone, you're going to accept anything. So I said, "Lay it on me." So she says, 2 years ago, my sister passed away, which was a very sad story, tragic story. And she said, "But you need to know that she left behind a little girl and I'm adopting her." Now, I don't know if you or your listeners feel what I was probably thinking in that moment, but I kind of froze and I got a little bit clammy. And I just said, "Is this happening?" right now? Did I really manifest this? So long story short, when she showed me a picture of this little girl, hand to God, it's the girl that I was dreaming of. Now,
Wow.
Jason, that's a tough one to get somebody to believe. Let's just invite everybody to dig into their dreaming part of their brain and know that happened. So long story short, we started the process right as the pandemic started to adopt a little girl from South Africa, which is extremely complicated. So when I met Jason, I was traveling to South Africa every 2 months to be with this little girl because we couldn't get her here. And exclusive right now, hot off the press, she's booked on a flight to come here on January 3rd, timestamp. We're recording this before. So we're going to have her here on January 3rd. So everybody pray for that to happen.
Wow. So now your wife, Mieke, she's from South Africa, right? Her family's from there. That's why you had to go back and forth to South Africa. Now, how old is
she lives with our grandparents over there, Mieke's parents.
So when is the adoption going to be official and final?
So that's a complicated conversation to have. I don't know if anybody's ever been through an adoption, but especially from the most banned country in the world right now, South Africa, during the pandemic. It's been 2 years now. It's done over there, but it's very complicated. And, for those of you that are entrepreneurs, it's a great business model because it's very expensive as well. But it's just been a blessing. Because during the whole process, this little girl has seen two people fight with everything they have and invest a lot of time and money into loving her. This little girl's excited to be here. She knows she's got great parents.
Wow. Well, congratulations to you and to her and to Mieke, because you've got other children, right? The children biological, but when you choose a child like that, that's a special experience. I've got family members who've adopted. I've got friends who've adopted, and I've walked through those things with them before. And my wife and I were foster parents for a short time during our married life, and we understand what that's like. So congratulations, and thank you for going through and committing to that. And how cool is the story that you dream of this little girl and then meet this woman that you'd never met before on an app. And then she's like, well, by the way, I've got this little girl I'm adopting, and it's her. That's a God thing, man. So congratulations to you for following through and being receptive to all that.
Appreciate it.
So now let's tie this into entrepreneurialism. We're not going to talk about how to get into the adoption racket, even though there's a lot of money in it.
A lot of money in it, yeah.
But adoption is very expensive. I know that, without giving away too much, I have some family members that adopted a newborn and several years ago, and it was a very expensive endeavor for them. And it was an American citizen, right? It wasn't even in a different country. It was an American citizen, and it was willing. The whole thing was planned. I mean, it was like but it was very expensive to the extent that they had to sell stuff and they had to really make arrangements. But you being an entrepreneur and a successful one at that, which is why you're on the show, the root of all success, is you have the means. You and Mieke have the means to be able to pull this off. Right. So let's talk about your start as an entrepreneur, and we're going to catch up to where you are today. But what's the origin story of JC, or Dragon, as you are sometimes called? What is the origin story of your entrepreneurial journey?
Well, what an interesting question, because, the first job I ever had was working at Piggly Wiggly at an amusement park, before they had cash registers. And I remember I used to get roughed up by some inner city kids to put like a $20 bill under some French fries when their friend came up to order, So that was the first job I ever had. And I think I made about $3.50, and I thought I was rich. But the first time I ever started dreaming of like supporting a family and going big was when I made a decision to be a chiropractor. And that had a lot to do with the way I was raised. Both my parents are professional athletes. So, my dad was an Olympic skier. My mom was a professional tennis player. Interesting stories there. But I was raised in a natural, holistic way, non-medical, very like if we had strep throat, my mom would like dance around us and give us a cup of water and hug us, So chiropractic was very, very big in our family. So I was enamored by what probably was my first mentor, and I became a chiropractor. And I always had a drive inside of me, Jason, that, Martin Luther King refers to it as a fierce urgency of now. Like I always just for some reason went after things, which could be dangerous if you go after something that has the wrong structure and model. Right. But chiropractic was what I chose. I was enamored by my mentor, and I created a very successful practice that helped a lot of people. And in what most people would call success, I made a lot of money. But what I didn't know back then is that there was something more important to me than money, and that was quality of living and being a family man. So I found myself trading my work and my drive to succeed for my family. So that's why, I've got a great relationship with my ex-wife, because we have a very good understanding of how it screwed up. But I just wasn't home. I just, for whatever reason, thought that my whole role in life was to bring in the dough. And I think a lot of people can resonate with this. So I was good at bringing in the dough, but I was not being a good husband and a good father, so.
Well, why do you think that's such a common thing for entrepreneurs? Is it part of just the DNA of people who become entrepreneurs in general to do that? Because your story is not unique. I mean, there's so many people who do the same crap as entrepreneurs. People who are listening to this show right now are doing the stupid stuff, that they're not spending time with the things that are most important in their life. They're chasing somebody else's dream. They're not chasing their own. And they're going to wake up one day sooner or later and realize what you realize, that you weren't paying attention to the right things. Why do you think that is? And then we'll get back to your story. Why do you think that is?
I think it's probably an identity thing. A lot of the stuff that I speak about on my podcast and in my book that I'm coming out with has to do with, you have to embrace the fact that you were programmed a certain way. I mean, if you read the book Sapiens, you can go way back and see why we are the way we are as humans. But the programming I'm referring to is from your mother, father, teacher, and preacher. So if I go back and I look at how I was programmed, what I saw, what I was taught, what I consumed as a child, I'm very big on being careful of what I consume. I saw my mom not really being cared for. I saw my family lacking in many ways. And to some degree, I probably blamed my mom or my dad for not providing. So I got this idea in my head, like a lot of us do, that I was going to create a different situation for my family. So I went to that extreme and I succeeded, but I missed in another way. So, it's an identity thing, and it's also a misunderstanding of balance and the way that the harmony of life really works. There's a balance between physical, mental, and financial, and there's a sweet spot in it. And I know that you're really good at helping people do that. I mean, heck, you teach people how to make money leaving their business, So I think that there's a lack of an education when we're young as well. We just don't know what we don't know. So I have empathy for the old me and for anybody out there that's doing what you said was crap, just because I forgive them for they know not what they do. But I think we need a better school of life at some point to teach people what actually matters.
Well, and thank God that you figured that out sooner than later.
The hard way.
Yeah, the hard way. And I think all of us do. I did that too. I mean, you figure it out one way or the other. And I always tell people you're going to exit your business one day, voluntarily or involuntarily. And it could be by death. So you need to make the choices wisely. So now let's go back to your story as an entrepreneur. You became a very successful chiropractor, built a great practice. You were one of the big wigs in the practice and in the industry rather. And you were speaking at conferences and you became president of societies. You were in charge of a lot of things. But at what point did you realize, okay, this isn't kind of what I signed up for? It doesn't give me the quality of life and I want to go do something different. So tell us about that transition from when you made that realization to moving to the next adventure.
I would say that it has a lot to do with waking up one morning and just being frightened. And it's, once again, it's another identity thing. Like I said, we don't know what we don't know, but there was just this one day in particular, I remember, where I kind of woke up in a cold sweat. And for whatever reason, I shut off my autopilot, my protective autopilot that was just driving at one thing. And I acknowledged, that's the blessing, is that I acknowledged the truth that I was unhealthy, out of shape, not being there for my kids, which I always claimed was important to me. And also, I mean, our marriage probably wasn't really meant to be, but I wasn't doing right by a fantastic human being. So that freaked me out, because I don't know if you can feel what that felt like, but I felt like a fraud. I felt like my life was out of control. And when I did a quick little assessment of the forecast of where I was going to be in 5 to 10 years, I could see that I would probably going to be dead, because I was not stopping the forward momentum while I was not taking care of what mattered most. And I was losing everything that really mattered to me. So I just realized, and how do you stop that momentum when you're so scared about the continuous growing of the machine? Because as you know, you make more money, you spend more money. And I never had enough money, and I still don't. Right. But yeah, it was a scary thought. But it was that fierce urgency of now that I talked about before. It's where I all of a sudden got confronted with something that I had to address no matter what. And that's when I flipped a switch and I said, I need a new business model.
Yeah. And what was your action point at that action step then? Did you decide to put the practice up for sale? Did you decide to exit the practice without selling it? What was your action at once you made that realization?
I wish that I was coaching with you at this time, because what I did was fun to listen to as a story, but it was pretty stupid. So all I did, my first action step was I created space for change, right? Which is a big step. It's one thing to want something, but I had to create space for it. And I believe, and I prayed for it, and I created space for it. And somebody came into my life at that time, and for whatever reason, I noticed it. I believe if they came in a day earlier, I might not have noticed it. I might have shut it off because I was so good at building walls. And long story short, this guy walked into my office and he pitched me on something that 100 times I would have said 99 times no to 1 yes. But it was timing, and it was my openness. I was in a curious exploratory phase where I needed change. So he was about this new idea of, having somebody coach me through a health program, which I needed. I was 80 pounds overweight from all the stress because I wasn't taking care of myself. So I initially embraced the idea of getting healthy, but then he unveiled this business model that I would have said no to every time. It was direct sales and network marketing, which I made fun of most of my life. But that day, I don't know if it was just a heavenly thing, but it just, like I always say in my glasses here, it made sense. So I embraced it. But the number one thing that I saw in this particular model was that I could work from home virtually and spend more time. So that was my priority at that time. So I just embraced it, and it turned out I was really good at it. And at the same time, the company just exploded into oblivion. And I went on an interesting ride for the past 15 years.
So what did you do with your chiropractic practice?
So about 5 years into this business. So in the beginning, it was very messy because I was working about 80, 90 hours a week in chiropractic, which is behind the scenes what it takes to be ultra successful in healthcare, unless you duplicate yourself, which is really tough, very tough business model, healthcare. So actually, we were talking about how that industry needs you. So I was sleeping less, I was like when everybody else was asleep, my light was on. That kind of visual. I got messy for about 5 years, built this as a side hustle, but then I started making real money. So I was probably working easily over 100 hours a week, burning the midnight oil. But once I started making money with this, I started worrying less about that, which is a good and a bad thing. So I started to take my foot off the gas of my practice, which made my numbers go down, which I didn't care about anymore because I was making great money here. And this is an interesting transition that a lot of entrepreneurs might go through.
Yeah.
The problem with the numbers going down is I also progressively started to care less about this business that I took so long to build. So when it came time to me evaluating that I did not want to spend any time, because it was a bad business model, the amount of time I had to spend to make money compared to what I was doing now. I was leveraging a 20-hour work week to make more money than I made as a doctor. So it got to the point where I was this is the crazy part. It got to the point where I was so fed up with, as we say in New York, humping ass. I was working really hard. I had this one day where there was this young chiropractor that was working in my office, and I just gave him my practice.
Wow.
I actually, and the reason why, Jason, is because I didn't want to even deal with selling it, because money meant something. I was a free man now. I was going to all the ball games and being there and going on field trips and stuff. So I just completely didn't even see the excitement of selling my practice, and I gave it to somebody, and he thought I was nuts. And I don't regret it, to be honest with you, because I'm fine, but it was probably a stupid idea.
Well, your maybe a bad decision from your perspective ended up being a huge blessing to him and his family, I can imagine.
Good point.
Right?
Good point.
Yeah. So all decisions, all things work together.
Or he could be overworked right now and divorced. Who knows? You
don't know what happened. You don't keep up with it.
I don't go back to that well. I don't fish in that pond anymore.
Dr. JC out.
Yeah. Dragon in.
So when did this persona, this brand begin its life?
What's interesting about it, and this is a fun thing for listeners to think about. If you look at my logo, it's a D, which you and I share in common as well.
That's right.
Our initials. But the D shows a transition from old to new. There's a chasm there. So there was a time in my life where if I projected and looked into the future at who I am today, a free man, making the money that I make, living the way I live, traveling the way I travel, my health, all that stuff, I would have viewed who I am today as a mythical creature, meaning something that you could think about but didn't exist. So I got fascinated with the concept of dragons, fire-breathing dragons, not kimono dragons, fire-breathing dragons like from Game of Thrones. And when I looked up dragons, I didn't know for sure, but when I looked it up, apparently for centuries and just in all these different cultures and civilizations, people have always talked about dragons, knew they didn't exist, but they talked about them as if they were real. There's stories about these things that never existed. So I decided to call myself the dragon because the thing that I thought was a myth, and also the beast that I was afraid of in my life, the monster in the closet per se, because I had a lot of fear, I decided to not only befriend it, but like in that movie Avatar, when they get on those dragons and they bond with them with their, did you see that movie?
Yeah.
So I bonded and I became the dragon. So the ultimate version of you shedding your fear from something is to be that. So I took on the personality of the dragon. It reminds me every day that I greet everything that I'm worried about and afraid of to that point where I actually call myself the dragon. And then, people started to think it was cool. Everybody wants to be friends with a guy named Dragon. So I started a podcast.
So now you've got a podcast called Rise Up.
The podcast is called Rise Up with Dragon, which started about like 8 years ago. I started a model morning. I read Hal Elrod's book, Miracle Morning, and I started my own morning, which I called Rise Up Great Day Morning. And I didn't know anything about podcasts, but I decided to start a podcast as a way of taking my thoughts, the ideas in my head that I would write down. But then I figured if I explained them to other people, this is a big move on my part too, it would really help. It was a selfish act. It would help me take ownership of these thoughts and further explain them. So I started this podcast, didn't advertise it or anything, but people started to wake up in the morning and listen to the live version of it. And now it's like this thing. And, like I go to these big events and people go, "Hey, it's Dragon. Can I get your picture?" And I'm like, how did that happen? But it's a special podcast because it's my way of repaying the universe that helped me take the blindfolds off and see some things. That's what my podcast is about, is I help people remove the unconscious, unwanted blindfolds so that they can see things and really gain access to higher levels of self-awareness and consciousness and live a bigger life.
That's really neat. And you were kind enough to invite me to be on your show not too far ago into the past. People can go look up Rise Up with Dragon and see your podcast, and might even run across an episode with little old me on there. Did you ever get a chance to meet Hal Elrod?
I never met him. I heard him speak one time, but I heard him speak at a time where I didn't have the balls to go up and say hi to people.
Well, it might be interesting at some point when you get a chance to meet him, just tell briefly that story, because I'm always, and we're going to talk about this here in just a couple of minutes on the show specifically, but I'm always interested in seeing how the connectivity points work in our lives and who makes changes. And I know that I recently had a guy reach out to me, which is why I would encourage other people to do what this guy did for me. I knew him when I was a youth minister back in the 90s, way back in the day. And he was a teenager back then. And honestly, I didn't even remember him. Like, I don't remember his name specifically, but he reached out to me through Facebook and sent me a message. And he tells me this really amazing long story about how I affected his life and what went on. I'm like, holy crap, I didn't even know. So me knowing that just, of course, gave me this great, good feels, and makes me feel good that I'm making an impact. So I would encourage you to do that for Al and anybody else that's been in your life that has had that impact. Always let them know, because you're being that person for somebody else. And it's always nice to know, how do these links in this chain all get connected? Well, let me ask you a specific question. And because this is the root of all success. So how would Dragon, JC, Jean-Claude, you got some cool names, man. Like, they're all cool names. So how would you define the word success?
The first thing I'll say about that, which is funny, is when you speak about success to an audience, the audience is pretty critical about what you say. It's like, I always find that if I talk about success, half the audience will agree with me and the other half will say, "Oh, you're wrong, dude." So it's funny. So I want to start off, first of all, by saying success is not something you can learn about through another. You can experience success through other channels, but it's something that you decide for yourself. So I'm okay with what anybody says about success. But for me, naturally, in my story, success is defined. I'm going to give you two things that I use to define success. One of them is defined by the degree to which you live what I call an integrated life. Now, you said before that, Mieke and I, Chicken and I, we have the means to do what we're doing. So living an integrated life requires having the means to do things. So finances are important in that sense for me, is when it comes to the financial sector of living an integrated life, finances give me the ability to live full out. And then the other pieces of it are, putting things that you claim matter most actually first, which is a challenge when you're an entrepreneur, because a lot of entrepreneurs think, well, when I have this, then I'll do that. And you can see that didn't work in my past story. So an integrated life for me is when you get your physical, your mental, and your financial not balanced. I think the only time we'll ever be balanced, my friend, is when we're 6 feet under, right? So it's more for me, like harmony, like an orchestra when they're all working together. So that's integrated life. That's how I define success. But the other one is how do you measure success? This is an interesting question. Like you could define success, but how do you measure it? Well, here's how I measure it. Success, like health, is like this destination. You're never going to be successful enough or healthy enough. But here's how you can measure how far you've come. And we've got a great opportunity to measure it right now. It's measured by how you handle adversity. Because adversity never goes away. So when adversity strikes, pandemic, money problems, all that stuff, that is what I look for when I'm looking to meet successful people. And you're one of them. Because, I don't know how much he and I talk off screen, and he goes through some stuff and he just handles it. That's a successful person.
So by that definition, do you consider yourself a successful person?
I'm near perfect and closing the gap.
I love it. I love the confidence. And you know what? You used a couple of words that I wrote down and take notes when people are talking on the show, because I get some really good golden nuggets. But I love integrated life. That makes so much sense. But here's the word that you said that I really like is use the word harmony. And so many people will talk about balance, and there's certainly nothing wrong with that, but balance is a weird thing. Balance is yes, it's either balance or it's not. It's a binary, one or the other, black or white. Where harmony, there's so many different types of harmony. There's 2-part harmony, 3-part harmony, 4-part harmony. You could even go into different cultures, and there's different types of harmonies in different cultures. Harmony is
Greg Kimball's here. He's going to tell us everything we're wrong.
Yeah. So harmony is defined by the song that's being sung. It's not necessarily the thing that's, it's not true for every person. And I love that, because I'm a rhythm person versus routine. Or how Elrod, you mentioned earlier in his book, talks about, morning routines and blah, blah, blah. I never was on that train, because to me, routines are something, it's a black and white. If I don't do it, I feel guilty. That's just me. That doesn't mean everybody's got to do that. So I started to use your term, integrated life. Well, how do I integrate that concept into the way I live? And I discovered that I'm more of a rhythm person. Like I just want to have daily rhythms of things that I go through. It's not routine. So if I don't do it, I don't feel guilty that I didn't do it. So when you use the word harmony to describe that as opposed to balance, I thought, man, that's kind of the same thing I've been talking about, the difference between routine and rhythm. Yeah. So I love that. And I love the confidence in your answer that, yes, I'm a successful person. Near perfect, closing the gap. Well, let me kind of dive in a little bit deeper, if we might, for the rest of our show. So one of the things that I discovered a long time ago as an entrepreneur is that the success stories that I was getting from people, whether it was on the show or whether it was pre-show, when I was just talking to people at the club, hanging out, having a glass of bourbon, what I was finding was that the same 5 things appeared in everybody's stories to success. If you're an entrepreneur, successful, these same 5 things, and they are passion, being in the right place at the right time, knowing the right people, preparation, and plan. Those, and I put them into P's because I'm an old pastor and alliteration makes it easier to remember. But I thought, do these 5 things actually happen in everybody's story? Because it was my experience personally, and my experience of interviewing other people. So that's why I started the show. So what I'd like to do now is I want to run through these 5 things with you, and you just be honest and say, yeah, that happened, didn't happen, helped me be successful, didn't. Let's start with the first one of passion. Passion, I believe, JC, is the number one, not the only, and isn't isolated by itself, but is the number one key to success for entrepreneurs. And here's what I mean. It's not just emotional passion, liking something, although that's important. What I mean is the actual real meaning of the word passion, which means willing to endure. That's what the word means if you go back and look at it. So when you say the passion of the Christ, it always bothered me because I thought, well, he doesn't seem very excited about this. Well, the reason it's called the passion of the Christ is because it means willing to endure for a cause. So I found that in every successful entrepreneur story, they had passion, and the real passion. Not whether they're excited about the product or service they're offering is not irrelevant, but not as important as the willingness to endure. So in your story of becoming a super successful entrepreneur in 2 different industries, or 3, you could count coaching and speaking as another industry, right? So how do you see passion playing into your story, if at all?
Yeah, it's such an interesting thing to think about. It absolutely plays into it. Just in the simplest form, we all know that, if you want something and it's important enough to you, you will make what I call a quality decision, meaning you'll decide to do the things no matter what. What's interesting, because passion, you could all of a sudden be in a consciousness of having passion, but it could go away.
Mm-hmm.
You've lost that love and feeling. I always like to use the analogy, like when I meet somebody that's like super passionate and they make a decision to go no matter what and endure things, but then the next day something happens and like an Etch-a-Sketch, it's gone. So I love this topic. And the greatest way I can explain this is there's a certain gear that all human beings have. Some don't believe they have it, where they can not only make such a decision, but make it with no effort at all. So here's an analogy I like to give. Whenever somebody's struggling with this, I always say, Jason, if I take your head and I push it underwater, what is it that you want?
Air.
How bad?
Well, for the first couple seconds, I'm okay, but eventually
once you realize that I'm not stopping.
Yeah, I want it more than anything in the world.
Bad. So, but what if you were in a bad mood that day? What if you don't believe in yourself? What if you're not motivated? What if the timing is wrong? What if you're overwhelmed at that time of your life? So you get the point. So how do we translate that into real time where we don't have to push somebody's head underwater? The thing that you desire has to be as important as the air you want when your head is underwater. And for me, that's my children. And that is me wanting to be, my ultimate goal in life is that I see my kids point at me and go, that's my dad. That's the air that I desire. So it's so easy for me to do the hard work. So I guess that's where my passion comes from.
That's really, really good. And that reminds me of something that I was taught a long time ago called the law of the ledge, where it was kind of the same idea where you're standing on this edge and, what would make you jump into shark infested waters? What would make you jump off the edge of the cliff? What would make you do it? And there's a really short list of things that would make you do it. Once you figure out what's on that list, there's your passion. There's your thing that you're willing to endure for us. Okay. So you have a very dedicated family man. We've talked about your story about meeting your wife and now this new daughter coming into your life that you've dreamt about. And so passion is a big part of your story of success and continues to be.
Yep.
What about the second key to success that I've discovered, which is that of being at the right place at the right time? And I'm gonna insinuate what I think it is, and then you tell me. Based on your story, both place and people are keys 2 and 3. Right place, right time, and knowing the right people. So maybe this all happens at the same time. But when that guy walked into your office 15 years ago, or whatever that day, I think you said about 15 years ago, when he walked into your office, that seems to me like that inflection point, that right place, right time, and perhaps even the right person that completely changed your life. But that's about the new version of where your life is. But you were successful before that too. So is there a right place, right time, and or right people that you could point to say, yeah, had these things, places, and people not been there, I wouldn't be who I am today?
I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but I think it's important for everybody to know that you're listening to someone speak that is not really sure that everything that we think is real, right? So, I'm a big advocate and student of simulation theory and all that stuff, and it's just a fun thing that I just decided to embrace. But what I really love about timing is I believe it's always the right time. This is an interesting concept. And it's important for people to understand this, because if you don't embrace what I'm about to tell you, you might wait for the right time. So, the big guy in the sky who has an endless supply gives you everything that you need. I always joke and say, if we actually could call God on the phone and ask him a question about how we're going to do things, I know he would be like, dude, I've been telling you every day. You're just not hearing it. So the number one challenge that we all have, so that you can see the guy that walks in the office and say, wow, great timing, right place, right time. I believe that's happening all the time, but it's just a matter of how conscious you are. Now, that's a whole other conversation, consciousness. So the best thing that I can do to advance myself and put myself in a position where the timing and the people start coming more often is becoming more conscious. So I work on my conscious quotient, right? I try to remain open rather than closed. So that day, I could say, yeah, it was great timing. I was shifting from wanting to be done with this and move to a different thing and all that stuff. But I believe I was like that all the time, just close-minded to it. So that day that the timing was right and the people were right, I just was in a higher state of self-awareness and consciousness that day. So if you want to hack that system, everybody, if you want to like tomorrow strategically be in the right place at the right time and attract the right people, which might even be this podcast right now, just become open and curious to the possibility of what I'm saying. Because if you're closed-minded to it, you might, it's called waiting for Godot. Do you know that fable?
No.
There's a story, look it up sometime. There's a story of these two guys waiting for their friend Godot to show up. And at the end, he never shows up. So waiting for Godot means waiting for something that never happens. So I think a lot of people, Jason, will spend their life waiting for the right time. You create the right time by becoming more conscious.
I'm so glad you did.
Did I get an amen?
Yes, 100%, because what I talk about and what I discovered in my interviewing people about this concept, they've never articulated it the way you did, but it's always the same thing. Nobody has ever showed up and said, yeah, Jason, I'm a multi-billionaire, whatever, because I just dumb luck at the bus stop one day. No, nobody has that story. The only person who has that story is Godot, because he never shows up. He doesn't exist, right? Well, that doesn't exist. But what I love the way you articulated it, because it's so true. And that's why I want to do this show for the listeners to understand, is that you have to pay attention. The timing is up to you. And if you're just waiting for dumb luck to happen, if you're waiting for the right person to walk in and knock on your door, you're never going to see it. You've got to put yourself in these places to do it. So I love the way you articulated it. I agree with you that I think that our Father in heaven is always seeking to give us good gifts. We're just too blind to pay attention to them most of the time.
Well, you know what the two greatest gifts he gives you every day is your eyes.
That's right.
When you open them.
I love it. Well, let me ask you about the last two of the 5 keys of success. So we got passion, we got being in the right place at the right time, we got knowing the right people. And by the way, we didn't get into this, and if you have a story, I'd welcome you to share it. Is that sometimes the right people are negative influences in our life. So they're push us in they're negative influences, but they push us in the right direction. But the fourth key I found was that of preparation. In other words, having the know-how to pull off what you're able to pull off. And I'm going to go back to your story, and I'm going to go back to what you talked about at the beginning, is that you grew up in a health conscious family. You had snowboarders, skiers, professional tennis players, chiropractic, the whole dancing around you when you had strep throat. Your preparation to be a more holistic doctor in the chiropractic field was really, the preparation came as a child growing up in that family. Had you been growing up in a family who ate TV dinners in front of a Wheel of Fortune every day and didn't ever exercise, you probably wouldn't have been a successful chiropractor or entrepreneur. So what do you think about that? How preparation played into your story of success?
Well, just quickly on the childhood thing. What's interesting about childhood is you don't have much say in it. So my theory, and a lot of people that are below the line and victims of their childhood are going to want to rip my head off, but that's the glory of the podcast. You can't. I believe that we're all prepared for life, no matter what our circumstances were, whether you were living homeless in the streets or you had a silver spoon in your mouth. All of that stuff is, remember, simulation theory here. This is a video game here, folks, in my mind. But I believe that your programming is there for a reason. If you had a really crappy childhood, you'll see how that will serve you later on. If you had a blessed childhood and you hit a wall one day, you'll see how that will serve you. But here's the best way that I can answer this question. So one of the just all-time greatest quotes that I use often is, who you are determines how well what you do works. So think about that for a second, because in the entrepreneurial world, when an entrepreneur sets its sight on something and it's sexy like air, what they have a tendency of doing is going to work to get that. They say, my fundamental decision is to have this. These are the things that will leverage that into existence. So I'm all in with that. But if it doesn't work, if you're speaking to Jason Duncan and you're getting all the coaching that you need and you're not succeeding, my question is, are you the right person for the job at this time? So when it comes to self-development, personal growth, and this is something that I think that I facilitate in my podcast, is I help people with self-discovery, self-development and personal growth to become who they need to become to effectively do the do to have the have. So be, do, have is the sequence. Who you be determines how well what you do facilitates what it is that you want to have. So yeah, of course. So what's the value, Jason, in me becoming physically, mentally, and financially more successful, as we said? Well, I believe that it's preparing me to effectively advance to the next level. Yeah. So all this stuff that we're doing right now, working on, it's not for today or for tomorrow. It's to prepare you to effectively move to the next level. So in my opinion, whatever happens to me, good, bad, it's all part of that journey. It's all good. When people say, hey, Dragon, how are you doing? I go, it's all good. Make sense?
It makes more than sense. I think that what we find in your answer there is that what people who are listening to the show who want to be successful and are trying to find out what the keys are, is that the preparation for you has probably already happened. You just need to pay attention.
You got the right
What are
stuff,
you prepared?
Baby.
Yeah, what are you prepared to be successful at? What happened in your life that will uniquely prepare you to be successful in ways that other people cannot? You have a unique story. Use that story. The fifth P, and we'll finish with this, is plan. And what I mean by plan is not a business plan necessarily. It's what was your plan to get the financial capital and the resources required to be successful? So you've built 3 successful businesses, perhaps more than that, but publicly you've got the chiropractic practice, you've got your direct sales company, and now your coaching and speaking platform. You're building these. What was your plan to make those successful?
Well, what's interesting about success and planning is it kind of happens along the way. There's only a certain degree can we strategize. First of all, my plan was to get help and guidance. So I sought coaches out, I sought mentors out and things. If I ever wanted something, like if I wake up tomorrow and I want to exit without exiting, I'm going to call you because you've already done it. So that's a big one that I always talk about is, the first step is to not make the plan yourself, because if you knew it yourself, you'd already have it. So find somebody that already knows the plan because that you can see they have what you desire. So I did that. I had to humble myself when I made a decision to go after something because I was a know-it-all. And that's a dangerous person to be. I was driven, but I already saw that I had made mistakes. So I started seeking out some just amazing, I'll give you one quick example. I wanted to become a good public speaker. So I started going to a lot of big events and I saw this one guy get on the stage in front of 3,000 people and just like Moses command the crowd. And I didn't even know who he was. I walked up to this dude and I had no money at this time either. I was just going through some financial hardships. I walked up to this dude and I said, I want you to be my coach. And he didn't even pitch that from the stage. And he's like, why? And I'm like, because I just saw what you did and I want to learn how to do that. That guy was my coach. I wrote him a hot check and I started this journey with him. His name's Larry Marks, and he was my coach for 3 years. I think I paid him like $1,200 a month for 3 years. And that's how I learned how to speak. So I started to do that. I didn't want to, try to build an airplane in the sky, so I started hiring people.
Well, you and I have then the same philosophy, is that we need to have coaches around us. We need to have mentors. Yeah. Through the abundance of counselors, our plans will succeed. And I think that's so many entrepreneurs try to go it alone. They end up failing. They end up getting trapped. And they just could use an extra perspective from someone like you or someone like me or millions of other coaches out there who are successful and can help you get you where you want to go faster. So JC and the listeners to this show, we've got all different kinds. We've got entrepreneurs who are just starting, haven't started. We've got entrepreneurs that are, 9-figure entrepreneurs, and further, very successful. And then a lot of people that are in the middle of that. I want you to take just a moment in your final comments. What would you advise that person on the starting line? What would you say to him or her about their journey as they're getting started? What advice would you give them besides things that maybe you've already talked about today, or maybe you want to reiterate something?
I think the first step would be probably to identify what it is. What's the outcome you desire? And don't just look at one sector of it. Like I would draw 3 circles on a piece of paper and delineate what your physical, your health goals are in life. And what is that going to look like? Because you can't just decide what you want. You got to go into the future like a little kid that wants a puppy dog and experience what it's like. So your physical, your mental, what's your mental status? If you just go after money and you forget about physical and mental, you might get the money, probably not, but then you won't be happy. So that's the first advice, is just chill out, take the pressure off, it's okay to take a day and think, right? And not just scatterbrain, go after stuff right now. Just chill for a second and allow yourself to set goals right now that are not connected to what you think is possible, right? Allow yourself to just simply decide what it is that you want, should there be no rules. Dream big. If you look at your past year and you're not moving forward right now, you're going to try to look at the future through the lens of the past, and you're going to totally limit yourself and probably just accept some sort of sucker job right now. Allow yourself to just have fun and dream big, right? Which is a lot easier when you have a coach. So once you've done that, I think a really, really important step, and I teach this in what I call my interface response system, is learn how to delineate 2 things. Learn how to delineate things that matter, and things that matter are things that matter, but are also things that are in support of the bus moving forward in those 3 sectors. Delineate what matters and what doesn't. So if something comes at you that is in no way, shape, or form in support of your bus movement, just like a bouncer in the front of a bar, that person's not on the guest list, they don't get in. So the second thing that I encourage everybody to learn how to do, and I say learn because this takes years, and start the process. Learn how to delineate the difference between things that are in your control and not in your control. That's the best gift I can give any of you. I'll challenge any of you right now. If you're feeling angst, anxiety, frustration, anger, depression, those things are connected to you trying to control uncontrollable things. Yep. If you can learn how to identify things that are out of your control, and more importantly, say, what can I do? What can I guarantee that I can do that leverages the bus moving forward? You are going to succeed. You do that with consistency and discipline, get mentorship and accountability. There's no way you can fail. The only reason people don't reach the mountaintop, it has nothing to do with how many seats are available up there. There's a seat for everybody at the top of the mountain. Jason's at the top of the mountain and he looks around and there's gazillions of empty chairs. And those are your chairs. The only reason you're not up there is because you're allowing stuff that doesn't matter to distract you off your path. So if you can learn those 2 skill sets, you can decide. Remember, simulation theory, this is a fantasy. You can have a good day or a bad day today. It's your choice. But once you decide what you want, and you might decide to have a bad life, you can get that too. But once you decide what you want and you can practice those two skill sets, what matters and what doesn't, what's in my control and what's not, there's nothing stopping you. I don't care who you are. The greatest, most successful people in the world started off as people that nobody believed would do anything.
Dr. JC dropping some bombs. I think that the Dr. Stephen Covey talks about shrinking your circle of concern, which is exactly what you're talking about. You know, we are too concerned about too many things. We need to shrink our circle of concern and expand our circle of influence, our sphere of influence. So, JC, this is fantastic. Thank you for sharing your perspective on success today, sharing your story. How would people get in touch with you if they want to reach out?
You know, the easiest way, there's so many different channels, but the easiest way is if you like anything that I said, just go listen to my podcast. It's free. It's called Rise Up with Dragon. You can go listen to me interview great people like Jason Duncan. I have a website, riseupwithdragon.com, and you can connect with me through there. The best way to interact with somebody like me is to come as you are, physically, mentally, financially, whatever your reality is. That's the conversation I like to have about you, where you are. And, you know, whether it's my podcast, whether it's, you know, my guidance, my programs and stuff like that, if they're a fit for what you need, if that's a vehicle that gets you out of the rocking chair and moves you into town in a car, then I would be happy to show you the way.
All right. Well, check out riseupwithdragon.com. Look him up on any podcast player, Rise Up with Dragon. It's JC Doornick, otherwise known as Dragon. So, JC, it's been an honor to meet you, and I look forward to staying in touch with you over the next years and continuing to build up one another as we kind of try to make the world a better place. And best of luck to you and Mieke with your new daughter in 2022 and getting that whole thing settled. And hopefully she's home soon and everything's 100% on the books, ready to go. So thank you for being here today, man.
Thanks so much, Brody. What a privilege.
Wow. Well, there you have it. Another amazingly successful entrepreneur, JC Doornick, sharing with us his story of how he became a successful entrepreneur. And as you can see, we go through these 5 keys of success every single week, how to be successful. Every entrepreneur's story has these similar keys that were used to unlock success of being, having passion, being in the right place at the right time, knowing the right people, being prepared, having a good plan. And as he talked about in this simulation, as he talked about it with us today, is that you have to just pay attention, open your eyes. What is it that gets you up in the morning? What is in that short list of things that would make you want to do anything? Passion. What are you passionate about? Are you putting yourself in the right places in the right times in front of the right people? You've got to pay attention to where those things are. It's not going to happen by dumb luck. And as far as preparation goes, like you said, what are you uniquely prepared to do that will make you successful? Pursue that. Go in that way and you will be successful. And then as we talked about, put together that plan to do it, but understand that you're going to need to adapt. Things are going to change from time to time. So this show is dedicated to helping you as an entrepreneur figure out how to unlock success for yourself by listening to stories of people like JC or Dragon and how he has done that. So I want to give you an opportunity. He talked a little bit about on the show today about how I teach people how to exit. He talked early on his show, in our show today, about how he exited his company and he just gave it away because he really didn't know what to do. But he could have had a better story. He could have had a better story for him, had a better story for his practice had he done what I teach. And he admitted that, right? And he doesn't regret it, but it is something he admitted. What about you? As we start off 2022, what are you doing to get yourself prepared to exit in a good way? I actually take people just like you through a 90-day program. I do live coaching to show you how to exit without exiting, how you can actually exit daily operations of your business without selling it to a third party or, like JC did, giving it away. You can continue to keep that cash flow, keep the tax benefits, keep business ownership as part of your portfolio, and you can move on to new and bigger adventures without having to sell the company. Now, you might be saying, Jason, I do want to sell my company. Okay, that's fine too. I will show you in these 90 days of the Exit Accelerator how to prepare yourself to get to that exit faster. That's why I call it the Exit Accelerator. If you want to learn more, go to exitwithoutexiting.com. That's exitwithoutexiting.com. And if you haven't yet followed me on LinkedIn or Instagram, you can look me up at The Real Jason Duncan. Once again, thank you for listening. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for watching on YouTube, wherever you engage with the podcast. Thank you very much for being here today. I do this show for you and for your benefit. So I appreciate you taking the time to listen. Well, tune in again next time when I talk with yet another very successful entrepreneur about his or her journey to success. Until then, I am The Real Jason Duncan, and Jesus is King.
Thank you for listening to another edition of The Root of All Success with The Real Jason Duncan. If you've enjoyed this week's episode, we invite you to visit therootofallsuccess.com to access the show notes and other helpful resources. Take charge of your business. Grow it from great to incredible. Join us again next time here on The Root of All Success.